Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. Today we bring you part 2 of our 2-part series with David Morley. Where we left off the conversation last week, David was sharing his thoughts and wisdom about the need for open and transparent communication in building and maintaining trust. This week, we talk about what it means to be an eclectic leader and how that can help you with team engagement. And we profile some of the flagship programs from Ponte Valle, including Lead to Engage, Lead to Remotely Engage, and their global engagement framework. Sit back and enjoy the program. We've now almost accidentally, but very nicely, bridged our way towards engagement and trust. And I want to ask a few questions here. So when I look at Ponte Valle and I look at your flagship program, I hear words like lead to engage, and I see a framework called the Global Engagement Framework. What does lead to engage mean?
Really, in really simple terms, it's really this idea that it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a raging introvert, you can be a raging extrovert, you can be a people person, not a people person. Yeah, you're just going to be who you are, but it doesn't mean that you can't lead to engage. And the premise of that program and the other stuff that sits around that is the idea that, and if I think back, I had moments in my career early on where I heard things said like, oh, you need to read this leadership book. You need to be like this person. We need to be like this person. And that never really sat with me because I used to think, well, okay, right, I'll look at that. But there was stuff that person might have done that just, I'm thinking, I can't do that. That's not who I am. And as I evolved over time with my thinking around this, I thought, well, there are bits that I like from all these different people. Okay, and all these other schools of leadership and personality development that I've studied and been a part of, in my life. There's all these different bits that for me, I pull from that create a way of being, for me that works for me and who I am. And I don't have to give up anything, but there are times when it makes sense to change parts of who I am because, I'm going to get a better result, if I do that. And so the premise of Lead to Engage is just that, it's about providing a way of looking at leading that essentially says, you know what, you don't need to give up who you are. You don't need to be someone you're not. But if you understand the natural way that a relationship develops and evolves over time, then what that simply means is that all of that great stuff you might have learned or read over the years, and you've kind of identified a few things that you like, it just means you can be smarter with how you deploy that and the ways in which you deploy it. A bit of path of least resistance stuff and just being smarter about how we lead. So, for example, on that engagement framework, I touched on a bit of that earlier. We move from being withdrawn, we go through our rituals to pastiming and telling our story, to being on task with each other. But as we move beyond that, it becomes a bit higher risk, because I'm offering more of myself in the relationship, and the risk is that I may get hurt. But as a leader, if we're prepared to do that, that we know in a team and in a relationship, the rewards are greater. However, the thing here is, and this is a really simple mistake that leaders make, that this can help untangle, and it does. And I'll tell this story actually because it's really worth sharing. It's a nice way of bringing it to life. When I was working with Talus, I happened to be in Canada to run some change or transformation workshops for a part of the business there. And I was walking back from the office, to my hotel, and there was a colleague there who I'd worked with, for some time in the past, who'd taken on this new leadership role in North America, and he'd also been running a workshop with his new team. And he said to me, I said, look, how was your day? How'd you go? And he goes, oh, Dave, it was frustrating. It's terrible. I said, why? What's up? He said, these guys just don't trust me. I've been in the organization now for 15, 20 years. I've done all this stuff. I've been around. If they don't know me, they know of me. They know what I can do, all that kind of stuff. And yet they just don't trust me. I'm there. I'm prepared to trust them, but they don't trust me. So essentially, we had someone who was at one end of the spectrum saying, yeah, high trust, high engagement, guys, let's just get there, let's just do this. But you've got a bunch of people who are at the other end who don't really know this person. Yes, there's perhaps a bit of trust based on competence, perhaps, but you need a bit of time because this was early days. We're talking a couple of weeks into the role. And so he was at one end. He had a group of people at the other end who were still stuck at that recognition place, who were probably waiting for some rituals and some opportunities to connect and get to know each other. And for me, that really highlighted this idea that as leaders, we should aspire to start with the end in mind, which is we start with the idea that we want to have a high trust, high engaging relationship with our people, but we need to start with where our people are on that journey. So we start with the end in mind, but we need to dial it back and start the journey with where our people are. And here's the other thing, Mick. I just can't say this strongly enough, and that is you may not get to that point of engagement with everyone in your team. It may not be possible because of once bitten, twice shy. You could have someone in your team that's had a really bad run of managers for some time, and it's great that they've landed you as someone who's interested and prepared to build that relationship. But you know what? They've just been burned so many times that it might take a while, before they come around and they're prepared to drop their guard. You might have someone else who is just functionally engaged. They're happy to be on task, but you know what? Not interested in people, not interested in relationships, purely for personality reasons. But then you might get people who are absolutely up for it. They've experienced good before. They know what it looks like, tastes like, all that kind of stuff, and they're just ready to go. And they spot that in you. Then, you might get to that point, much, much quicker. So we have to remove this irrational expectation that we can build engagement and have those high trust relationships with everyone, because the minute we think we can, it almost creates this pressure, this irrational force, and what we tend to do is force people away rather than develop and actually be engaging with someone in that rituals and pastiming and rapport phase of a relationship. Because if that's all you can do and they're quite functional and good at their job, then fantastic. And they may come on the journey further. So for that reason, we can't put time boundaries on how we build trust and a relationship.
I'm hearing so many things there, David. I want to reflect back to you and see if I've understood it well. So you have me thinking about things that we think about in a coaching mindset, and we often use things like a scale of 1 to 10. Where do you think you are today? Someone might say, I think I'm a 3 or a 4. And where do you want to be? I want to be at a 9 or a 10. And let's say it's a trust continuum like that. And for some people, depending on the context, you could say to them straight away, okay, so what would a 10 look like? And start going from their 2 or 3 directly for 10. But some people are not ready for that. Some people you might have to ask them, okay, so what would a 4 or a 5 look like? And go one step at a time on that journey is my first reflection on what you're saying. But I also think it's important in what you're saying that you need to embody the values and behaviours that you're looking for them to reciprocate. So even though they may need to take baby steps, or hopefully bigger than baby steps, but steps along the way towards that trusted relationship, you still need to be representing those values from the outset and showing, okay, this is what trust looks like. Your thoughts on that?
Yep, absolutely. And that's what I mean. You start with the end in mind, and yes, we need to dial it back and bring them on the journey from where they're starting, because otherwise you've just got a big gap.
Meet them where they are.
Absolutely. But it doesn't mean we don't embody those values and we don't walk the talk, because we want them to see what good looks like. We want them to experience that. We want them to feel that. And if they've been missing that for a long time, I know someone quite close to me, who has had one of those really terrible situations where they've had a run of about 3 or 4 just really terrible management situations. And that's damaging. That's damaging to to esteem, to confidence, and that's to me that situation that was just I hate to use the term, but just bad luck. One of those things that happens, and so that reason, yes, we embody it, we walk the talk, because you want them to still get a sense of what good, can be. And I would add that we therefore need to be unconditional. Our approach in the early stages of any relationship, when we're offering up that chance to share, needs to be unconditional. We can offer that opportunity, but it may not be reciprocated, and that's okay. When we're on task and working on a project, that's a bit different. That's quite conditional because we both need to be putting something in it, something. And if you're fortunate to evolve a relationship, beyond that, to that point of intimacy and authenticity and being quite vulnerable, that's about trust leadership. And that's different to the unconditional piece, because unconditional means it's one way. I can offer it out, it may not come back. But to be in that trust relationship, it's absolutely two-way. Because for trust to grow and to flourish, it needs to be two-way. There's an absolute obligation there for a trusting relationship to have two parties contributing consciously, not just unconsciously. So that's your differentiation in that. Yeah.
We'll bring this up again at the end of the show, but just listening to David, what he's talking about, if you want to see a reference for this, on the Ponte Valle website, there is a copy of the Global Engagement Framework, and it talks about the unconditional leadership, the conditional leadership, and the trust leadership. So if you want to see a pictorial vision of what David's talking about, we will give the link in the show notes, and we'll talk about that at the end of the program. The other thing I saw in Lead to Engage, David, and you've also mentioned this very early in our discussion, you spoke about eclectic leadership and the thoughts about learning from leaders before you. You've also mentioned in the podcast interview a number of times about bad managers. So tell us more about eclectic leadership and about how someone can forge themselves to be the leader that they want to be.
Yeah, look, it's I think a lot of us do it naturally. We have a bad experience, with a leader, and we might just say to ourselves, oh, gee, if I was a manager, before we've even got a management role, you'd probably say, oh, if I was a manager, there's no way I would do that. So right there is like a little bit of starting to build your own portfolio or your own library of what you think a good leadership looks like. And I think the next natural step is just to be observant. If you're reading biographies of leaders and people in history, if you're going on different courses throughout your time, whether they're leadership or related to personal or professional development, it's being prepared to connect dots that may not always be connected. Bring different theories together that may not always be connected if you think it makes sense and if you think it works. And a big part of this is about experimenting. It's about trying it. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. But it comes back to intent, doesn't it? And if the intent is always healthy, then that's okay. You've not created damage, hopefully. And so you try something else. And so it really is about being prepared to pull different ways of thinking and doing stuff from even the most random of sources, whether it's something you spot in a movie, you see something really great, if you're coaching your kids' sporting team, and you spot something out there on the field, think, wow, that's fantastic. That's something that is brilliant. Pull that story in to be a part of, who you are and what's important for you.
So that's something that I practice all the time, David. I have been doing that throughout my career and picking up different lessons. So trying to adopt a learning mindset at all times, even when things don't go well, I'm looking for what did I learn from that situation. And from a leadership point of view, and you're going to recognize some of these names, I sit there and pick things out from Chris Jenkins, who I think are amazing. Laurent Eskenazi, what did I love? What was inspiring? Matt Cole, he's from Cubic. You might not know him, but maybe you have. Jeff Lowinger. I sit there and go, oh, I really like this. I really like this. I really like this. And I'm putting a jigsaw puzzle together of those admirable attributes. And then I also dig into my past and I think about bad managers that I've had, and unfortunately I've had my fair share. And I think about the things that they did, but most importantly, I always think about the way they made me feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if someone made me feel not valued, that I didn't matter, that my voice wasn't important, what did they do to make me feel like that? And I put that into my kit bag as well of things not to do. And that's been what I've been trying to create as myself as a leader, is the amalgam of those wonderful, the Chris's, the Laurents, the Matts, the Jeffs of the world, and filtering out the others. And I won't mention the others by name.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think that's just so nice. And yeah, I do recognize some of those names. And you actually made me remember someone. I'll just share this just very briefly. When I worked with the Avis Budget Group, someone who, and I use this story to highlight the nature, the idea of psychological distance. And psychological distance is this idea that we can be geographically quite distant, but we feel quite close. Like when you have a relative in another country or a close friend, you pick up a phone, you're on a Zoom, and you might as well be right there with them. And vice versa, you can be working with someone, sit really close to them, and you may as well be on different planets. And when I was at the Avis Budget Group, my functional boss was in Parsippany in the US, and where Avis Budget Group was headquartered. And almost every Friday morning, without fail, my boss would arrange a call. There was no Zoom or anything back then, but it would be on the phone, and whether we had stuff to talk about relating to work or not, we would still dial in, and he knew about me, my family. He was just dialing. He didn't have to. It was at absolutely the wrong end of the day, for him. He always made that time. And when we spoke, I felt connected, recognized. I looked forward to it. It was a really great way to start my day. And he may as well have been in the same room, with me. So. And he's one of those people, Ned Linnon, and I think he's still head of HR now globally for the Avis Budget Group. But one of those leaders who really embodied everything we've been talking about, I think.
That makes me want to talk about two other things that I've seen in your Lead to Engage curriculum. Let's start with engaging conversations.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Look, an engaging conversation actually follows the flow of what we've been talking about. It's about in that moment, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's half an hour, whatever the case may be. We don't need to be an amazing people person to have a conversation that's meaningful or a one-on-one. So if we go with the idea of the one-on-one, all that simply means is in the engagement framework, we talk about three stages of building a relationship. There's the rapport phase. Okay, which is around the recognition. Okay, there's the middle phase where we create momentum and the other person feels involved in what's happening. And then, of course, we get to that engaged point. And there's a few elements around this. And if you're listening to this, I encourage you to give this a go. First of all, disrupt the pattern, which is probably not too hard these days. That we're working mostly virtually. But if you're working in an office environment, disrupt your pattern. Don't do your one-on-one where you normally would work. Try and get out. Go somewhere a little bit different. And that rapport part of the conversation, the first part, is if we think about the word rapport, it's about establishing sameness and reducing difference. So we just want to get in step with one another. And I'm a big proponent of, do your one-on-one walking, because if you've got different levels of energy, what that means is you can just get in step. Get a cadence, happening between you. So straight away, it's not just a psychological rapport, but you've got a physical rapport as well, which becomes a really nice thing. And be interested. So in that rapport phase, the thing, be interested in the other person, not try to be interesting. So bring them into the conversation. So by being interested, just ask about them. How are they doing? How's your week been? How's your day? Whatever. Then we move into the momentum phase. And this is where we disrupt again, because I think a lot of people, especially the people who are maybe a bit more pessimistic, glass half empty, or are expecting in a relationship with a manager that they're going to have holes picked in what's going on. We want to disrupt again, okay? We want to create some new patterns and bring them into the conversation. So from that point of view, what we want to do is really simply say, hey, what's been working well for you this week? And straight away, it sets the tone for a different sort of conversation. And if possible, ask for examples, because for some people, it's one thing to talk about it, but if they're coming from a place of maybe low confidence, maybe low self-esteem, those sorts of things, and we can spot that, if we can get them not just to talk about it, but to maybe point to some examples of what's working well, all that's simply doing is just providing a bit of reinforcement, internally. Okay, the more they're talking about it, they're within their mind, they're playing with it and getting used to the fact that, I can do good stuff. Yeah, and I do good things as well. So we do that, and then if the one-on-one is around, then having to talk about some of the hard stuff, we then lead into that, and say, okay, well, look, you could either, and what I like to do is say, look, have there been any challenges? What's the hard stuff that you're dealing with at the moment? I don't like to rescue. I don't like to be condescending. And I think the underlying principle of this is that we're on the level where we're treating them like a human. Yes, we're disrupting a few patterns, but we're genuinely interested. And I genuinely want this to be a dialogue, where if you're going to share the tough stuff, I'm going to give you every opportunity to bring it to the table. And then, let them name it. If they don't, well, that's fine. Then there's means and ways of introducing something that we might have spotted, and we're able to work with it. But we don't lead with it. It's not then coming back and doing the whole positive, negative, positive. It's a conversation. And if it's just a one-on-one, then you just leave it open. What are the challenges? What can you be doing about it? What can other people be doing to help you? All that kind of stuff. And then we round out, and leave them, with I guess I call it a positive looking, a forward-looking positive close. So in other words, look, Dave, I think you're doing a great job, with what you've been doing. You got some hard stuff there, but it's almost like a bit of a recap. But we're closing it out. And if there's any check backs that we're going to build into this, let's check back in, see how you're doing with it. Then we just name that and make it explicit, because that's recognition as well. That's recognition that I care and I actually want you to come back, and let's check in and see how it's doing. I'm just not going to leave you hanging. Yeah.
There's so many nuggets of gold there, David. I want to play back some of them for the audience. So,
sure.
Be interested, not interesting. That's amazing. That's great advice. And I would add to it, it's got to be a genuine interest. So take genuine interest in your staff. It's not lip service.
Yeah.
Really listen and remember, it builds connection. It shows respect. I think that's wonderful. And then with the momentum that you speak of, David, what I was hearing was a lot of learning mindset and a coaching mindset in terms of that, and elements of positive psychology, the kind of Martin Seligman type approaches. And one of the things I really liked about the way that you framed the discussion was testing self-awareness by letting the other person name the challenge and giving them a psychologically safe environment to do so. You're also testing whether there's self-awareness there or whether it's a blind spot for them. And if they have self-awareness, you're partway along the journey already towards some kind of remedy. If they don't have self-awareness, as David said, you then may have to help them to uncover a blind spot. And then the crescendo. The crescendo was also one of respect and showing interest again. So, loved every part of what you said about your version of an engaging conversation. Really great, David. The other thing that you mentioned in there is that we are predominantly in a work from home environment now. And one of the programs that I saw that Ponte Valle is running is a version of Lead to Engage called Lead to Engage Remotely. Tell us more about how that came about and how is it different?
Yeah, sure. So really it's the same principles, but we're taking more of a focus and a look at how we can build engagement, especially focusing more heavily on those early stages of the relationship, the rapport, and the past timing and the storytelling. The reason for this is I think this was missed by a lot of teams. When we shifted to virtual working, if you think about it, the norms in a team when you're face to face are built over a certain period of time. We're conditioned to that. Okay. The minute we shift to a virtual way of working, whether we like it or not, if we think about our Tuckman stages of team development, essentially what happens is when we go from one normed and performing way of working to all of a sudden our conditions have changed, whether we like it or not, we're actually going back to what I call restorming. Okay. And that restorming means we need to rework out what it means to be who I am in this team and how I contribute. Because if you are someone where charisma is everything for you and your personality, that's not going to come across as much. You can't leverage that as much when you're working remotely. Whereas someone who's more introverted actually could step up a bit more because it gives them that bit of protection that they like, and so they may find. And I have seen a lot of examples where people who may have been reserved in the group environment find their voice more in the online and virtual world. So from that point of view, it's really helping the team see and helping leaders see, okay, how do I restorm? How do we take care of that? And so it's taking the same principles, but then applying them through that phase. Okay, what does restorming look like? How do we reset those values? How do I re-engage people? Because they need to be re-engaged. And how do we re-norm? Okay, so what does norming look like for who we are in this world? Because your safety net is that if you were a really highly engaged and a performing team before, that's fantastic. That's your safety net. So it's really helping a leader take a look at it through that lens and applying many of the same principles, but through that process of having to re-engage and perhaps re-engage people in a different way, but also helping the leader to understand what it means to be engaging. And we dive into a lot of other factors such as communication. We only see so much of ourselves on the screen, yet a majority of the message is received, we know, in communication based on body language. So it's how do we reconfigure our messaging to ensure that our teams are getting what they need in terms of messaging. It's how do we reconfigure our communications in general so that we're not overdoing it, not underdoing it, but finding and striking that right balance. The other thing too here is, and it's not just the restorming part, it's really understanding, well, what do rituals and past timing mean? And in a virtual world, and do they become more important? Well, they do. And it's how do we build them in a more regular way? And how can I be a leader that can not just be on task, but carve out more time to be able to connect with my people and bring just a little more in that way without, if you like, losing my own time to do my own day job. So it's those sorts of factors, yeah.
Yeah, great, David. And I think there's some universal lessons there for everyone. So we're speaking about the change that happened in the world that led us to all work from home, but I think any factor could lead to what David's talking about there. So for those that are following at home, so we're talking about team performance models and whether you Drexler Sibbett or any other model, they usually go through some kind of forming, storming, norming, performing. And if you're managing a high performance team, that doesn't mean that you stay in performing forever. There can be external factors. It can be deterioration over time. You need to constantly work at it. And I like David's terms here, restorming, renorming. I think you do have to do that. Whether it's an external factor or anything else, you need to think about that from time to time. Okay, we've been talking a lot about leading to engage and at the individual leadership level. I think most large organisations in the world also like to measure their employee engagement collectively.
Yeah.
What kind of guidance can you give about how organisations go about that and what works, what doesn't work?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think first things first, you've got to understand and be really clear around why you're doing it, what you want to get from doing a measurement. I think Probably the biggest mistake organizations make with any sort of survey process is not really knowing what to do with the information once you get it, or being prepared to do something about it once you get it. Unfortunately, I have seen over the years some organizations who see the engagement or the survey process as a box ticking exercise. Just to say, hey, look, we do this, and we do care. But caring means that you do something about it once you get those results. So the single biggest thing is starting with the end in mind and being really clear around why we're doing this and what we want to get from this as an organization. How does it fit in with who we are strategically? I think that's a big missed opportunity for many organizations. So essentially, my advice is, first of all, have an absolute solid strategy for your organization and your business in place. And that needs to extend to your strategies around people and culture. So that's the first thing, because when we're measuring engagement, it's engagement. Engagement is so many factors. Engagement is my perception of whether I think we've got clear direction and I know where I'm headed and how my job fits into that. Engagement is the result of culture. Culture sits far more deeply than engagement. So you've got those factors. There's the leadership piece, the role of leaders, and there's structural stuff, which is things like your governance, your organizational structures, your everything around how you hire, how you run your program. So all of the structural things that set us up for success. So I think if you're going to invest money in doing an employee engagement survey, you want to have at least done your homework, prepared yourself, and then what you're doing is you are genuinely looking to see, okay, where are our gaps? It's almost like a much bigger training needs analysis. So let's just see where our gaps are. And I think that if it fits strategically within the organization, then it can be built in as something that the outputs of that are things that feed back into the development and the growth of the organization. And the other thing too is I think organizations mix up the terms engagement and culture as well. Engagement is the result of culture amongst other things. So also being really clear, do we want to measure culture or do we want to measure engagement? Because I've seen organizations get that just a little bit wrong. Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot there about intention again, David, and you referred to intention very early in our discussion, and now what you're saying, whether it be measuring engagement or culture, that you're doing it with an intent in mind as to what you're going to do with the results and actually do something with the results, which I think is one of the issues that some companies suffer with. Not all. Some are better than others, of course. What about the relationship then between employee engagement and trust? Where do you see the connection there? Yeah,
look, they're intertwined. I think, if we think about trust, it comes when I feel safe, psychologically safe. Trust comes when I just know I'm going to be heard, I'm going to be listened to, may not be agreed with, but there's room for the different voices. We know what trust feels like. And so when I feel trusted, and the trust is part of the equation, absolutely there's a strong relationship with higher engagement, because I'm prepared to do more, I'm prepared to voice more, I'm prepared to say more. And if we think about it through a cultural lens, if you're in a global team, we have the opportunity to, and there is a bit of research out there over the years that suggests that culturally diverse teams or global teams who really get this right, who get that trust factor right, are highly engaged and perform really, really well. The flip side is they can also get it really, really wrong as well. So it's almost one or the other. Yeah.
All right. So two questions I want to ask now, and I'm asking them in this sequence on purpose. What do you think are the things that kill trust?
Ooh. Okay. Things that kill trust. There's a cultural aspect to my response here. I think, or there definitely is a cultural impact, but the things that immediately come to mind for me is the things that kill trust from a leadership perspective is when we fail to deliver on direction, when we're not clear on direction and letting people know where we're headed, when we are not very good at decision making or we opt out of that, and when we do the opposite to everything we've been talking about, So when we're unable to create that space or be inclusive and bring people in, when we don't take care of those early stages. But with my cultural hat on, I would also say one of the things in the Anglo world that really stands out there is that being effective, the decision making and getting stuff done, because we do open the door to trust and build trust based on competence in the Anglo world, in the individualist world. Whereas in more collectivist worlds, what breaks down trust is when you aren't prepared to show yourself. Okay, because in a collectivist world throughout Asia, Middle East, India, Eastern Europe, all those countries I mentioned earlier, I build trust with who you are. It's implied that we're here to do business, but I need to know who you are. That's why you see so many trade missions go, for example, from Australia into China, for example, over the years. And you hear this real naive statement going, oh, we're going to come back at the end of a week with signed deals. And they come back frustrated because all they did throughout the week was socialize, drink, and maybe towards the end of the week, get down to the nuts and bolts of a bit of business, but certainly no contract, and think that it was a failure, when in actual fact, that wasn't failure. That was the process of building trust and working out, do we want to do business with you? Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, for me, the big one is when the actions of the organisation don't match the words that come out of the mouth. All right. So, particularly around things like values and beliefs.
Absolutely.
The opposite question, to bring it to a more positive note, what builds trust?
Oh, look, I think the things that build trust are, within an organisation. Again, when the organisation as a whole brings clarity to and is really clear on what we're here to do, when the layers of culture that I observed when I joined the organisation live up to what I see. So if as an organisation we're saying, when I'm shopping around for a new role and the organisation says, we're innovative, we care about our people, we really listen to the customer, and I get in there and you deliver on that, that's brilliant. That's fantastic, and the other factors that drive trust is being open, approachable, so information flows around more easily between the organisation. I'm not feeling like it's a battle all the time. And I think culturally speaking, organisations that are far more learning organisation oriented, so in other words, we're always growing, we're always learning, we're listening. So if we make a mistake, that's okay, but we learn from it and we do something with it. So I think they're the sorts of factors that help build trust.
Yeah, thanks, David. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us on that. That brings us towards a close of our interview today. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to finish with the final two questions that we ask pretty much all of our guests. So the first one, what's the one thing that you know now, David, that you wish you knew when you were 20?
One thing I wish I knew now that I knew. All right, probably that everything doesn't need to be done yesterday. That I don't need to please other people for the sake of pleasing other people. And I think that's, if I hadn't known that back then, I think I would have made some different decisions. Absolutely. But the idea that you don't need to be out there and just delivering like yesterday on everything and lumping a whole bunch of, pressure on your shoulders for nothing. Yeah,
very good. Okay. And the final question. So we've spoken a bit about Ponte Valle along the way. I'm sure there's going to be people in our audience that will want to know more about Lead to Engage, about the global engagement framework and all of the work that you do. So please share with the audience, if someone wants to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, sure. The best way to get in touch is via our website. You'll see enquiries at pontevale.com or directly to me, really easy, david.morley at pontevale.com. That's probably just the easiest way for listeners out there to reach out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. And we will be putting those details in the show notes as well so that people can find it quite easily. Thank you so much again. This has been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing so openly with our audience. I've personally taken so much away from today's interview, and I know that our audience will do too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mick. Much appreciated, and thanks for having me on.
You've been listening to The Leadership Project with your host, Mick Spears. We really hope you enjoyed this great interview with David Morley. Next week, we bring to you a young socialpreneur, Kimberly Abbott, who has a vision of redefining what it means to be a millionaire. You do not want to miss this episode. In the meantime, please do remember to hit subscribe on your preferred podcast service, and it'd be greatly appreciated if you could leave us a review and a comment. Don't forget to join our Facebook community group, where you can join with us in the dialogue and discuss what it means to be a leader in a modern world. And we will soon be announcing a series of webinars and leadership roundtables so that we can get this discussion even richer. Please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.